The American colonial expansion of the 17th through 19th centuries saw the suppression and slaughter of the native peoples living on the North American continent. This genocide erased not only a rich and diverse tribal culture of the day, but also any knowledge of or connection to its mysterious mound-building ancestors. Perpetuated by the outdated yet persistent colonial myth of native and tribal peoples as savages, these enigmatic mound cities were bulldozed to the ground, regarded as mere trash heaps to be plowed over in order to make way for roads, farms, factories, and shopping centers. I'm Corey Ruffin, and I'm mad for mounds.
Mounds, 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 mounds. My name's Corey and I'm running all around. I'm traveling the country in search of burial mounds. Mysterious, I left a secret buried underground. But will we ever know the reason? Mounds, 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 mounds.
Central Ohio is a rugged and rural area crisscrossed by valleys and covered in forest. It is also the epicenter of what we call the Hopewell and Adena cultures, a mysterious and forgotten people who inhabited North America from 1000 BC to 1000 CE. These artists and architects reshaped the land with their many burial mounds and earthworks, many of which were built to precise geometric and astronomical alignments. Seemingly springing up out of nowhere and disappearing just as suddenly as they arrived, their practice and influence once spanned an area covering Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, Wisconsin, and beyond. In central Ohio alone, excavations have unearthed shells from the Florida coast, copper from Lake Superior, and obsidian from Yellowstone. What this means is these people got around, and wherever they went, people thought they were pretty cool.
Okay, now we're trekking through backwoods Ohio in search of mounds. And see this backpack here? No food, no water, no bug spray, just camera equipment. A testament to my own ignorance and inability. Anything could happen to me out here. I could get stung by a bear, my corpse left here to rot, only to be dug up 1,000 years later. But no mystery, no majesty, just some dope with a selfie stick, lost in the woods.
We're approaching the Fort Hill earthworks, a 2,000-year-old earthen structure of unknown purpose and use. All that remains of it are its lengthy earthen and sandstone walls, which range from 8 feet to 16 feet high.
Just as I sit atop my own bloated ego and look down at everyone around me, so does the Fort Hill ancient earthwork stand atop this massive plateau and overlook the surrounding landscape. Now I know it's barely perceptible on camera, but this entire ridgeline you see behind me is one of the walls. Now it was dubbed a fort by local European settlers because all they had on their mind was conquest. That's all they could understand. But this 2,000-year-old structure was much more a ceremonial and civic center than it was a fortification for defense.
This here Fort Hill was built by the Hopewell people, and they were a mound building culture that flourished throughout Midwestern and Eastern North America from about 300 BC to 500 AD. Fort Hill here is 2,000 years old, and its walls stretch for about 1.5 miles. The place was built on top of and was a modification of an existing plateau. It's not known why it was built, but building a structure such as this was not uncommon at the time. All over North America, you'd find places like this, earthen or stone walls that usually follow the crests of natural hills and ridgelines, and that sometimes contained within their borders other mounds, reservoirs, or other human-made structures like longhouses were prevalent everywhere. If you've taken any kind of a hike through hilly areas in places such as Ohio or West Virginia or Georgia, you've probably encountered them and not considered them to be anything other than a naturally formed ridge or hill. But they are not natural. They are artificial, and they are remnants of a massive, humongous lineage of peoples who are utterly ignored and completely forgotten by us modern white Americans who use their land while knowing nothing about them, paying them no respect, and giving them no honor. But back to topic. These walls were not forts like we thought them to be. They were not fortification. They were ceremonial. They were symbolic. And at its core, this practice of earth shaping is fundamental to all pre-Columbian native cultures. While the North American peoples like the Hopewell here at Fort Hill or the Adena, Mississippians, and more were building mounds and walls, so were Central American cultures such as the Olmec and the pre-classic Maya developing their own mounds, raised roads, canals, and platform structures in their nascent first steps of monumental engineering.
This ridge line, this is entirely man-made, kind of forms a circle at the top of this plateau. It is heavily eroded, but everywhere you look all around, there's little remnants of a wall or mound or shape. I claim to have no knowledge of these people or these places. I am just endlessly fascinated by them, by their antiquity, by the mystery of who they were and what they have to tell us from the past. I want to reach out to them. I want them to speak to me. I want to learn from them. I want them to tell me why I'm such a fuck up. Now look at these sloping walls. You can see them there all along the ridge. This site is massive. You really can't see it on camera. It's so subtle, but you can really, with the naked eye, discern what's a natural formation and what's man-made. And it's quite large and encompasses quite a large area. All self-deprecating humor aside, it is a very impressive and large site. Hello, I'm in rural Ohio, standing here at the coiled tail of the end of the Great Serpent Mound. The Great Serpent Mound is the world's largest effigy mound. Now, if you don't know what an effigy is, look it up, because this isn't an educational program. I'm just taking you to some sites that I think are cool. So let's go take a look.
Well, we're rising above the head of the Serpent Mound now. There's its open mouth, and you can see it's devouring something, maybe an egg or the sun or the earth, I don't know. But I hear a lot of people saying after looking at stuff like this, big deal, it's just a pile of dirt. And I say to them, well, you try erecting a 4-foot-tall, 1,300-foot-long effigy mound out of dirt, and let's see how you do. And on top of that, do it with nothing but woven baskets and Stone Age tools, and beyond that, have your mound align itself perfectly to true north and make its curves point perfectly to sunrises and sunsets and lunar rises and lunar sets of the solstices and equinox, because that is exactly what's going on here. This place was obviously mad-style important, so important that it was used by many people over thousands of years. Radiocarbon dating of various sections have pegged it as being anywhere from 2,000 to 500 years old, and that means one could safely assume that many peoples used, maintained, and renovated this site over the passage of time, just like how we've seen that the Egyptians renovated and maintained the Sphinx. The Serpent Mound could be as much as 3,000 years old, so why don't you go make something out of dirt that'll last so long if it's so easy? These people who built and used this thing were just as significant a culture as any of the other monumental builders of ancient times, and they sadly represent a forgotten and suppressed piece of North American history.
Now, one of the more fascinating elements of this area is that this mound site was built on the site of an asteroidal impact from nearly 300 million years ago. It speaks volumes to the amount of astrological knowledge these people had and the significance it had to them. If I spent half as much time gazing at the stars as I do as my stupid cell phone, maybe I'd come close to achieving what these people have.
The serpent mound is probably a calendar. The head of the serpent is aligned to the setting sun on the summer solstice, its curves align to the summer solstice sunrise, the equinox sunrise, and the winter solstice sunrise. Summer solstice sunrise, that's a lot of S sounds, kind of like the S of a snake. The coil of the tail aligns to true north. Coils and spirals are very important to all native cultures, and native-made spirals can be seen everywhere in this country, especially in the form of petroglyphs. Some that I've been able to visit, like the ones in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, seem to be a kind of calendar that tracks the changing of the seasons. The frequency of which spirals appear definitely suggests that any site bearing this mark had significance of some kind to the people passing by. And why do we know the Serpent Mound was significant? Well, aside from how fucking gigantic it is, it's because there is evidence of multiple cultures using the site over thousands of years. In addition to the Serpent Mound itself, present on site are 3 Adena culture burial mounds, Hopewell mounds, and 1 Fort Ancient culture burial mound. That's almost 1,000 years of mounds. The Adena are the grandpappies who predate all the other mound-building cultures. They were around from about 1000 BC to 100 AD, and they are the ones who started all the mound-building traditions in these Midwestern cultures, though there is evidence of other mound-building peoples in the Americas dating back as far as 4000 BC. There is as of yet no connection of them to the Adena. And the Hopewell are considered to be the zenith culture of the traditions started by them. The Adena were hunter-gatherers who traveled extensively. They were the first pottery makers in Midwestern North America, and they made amazing and perplexing stone tablets which could have perhaps been stamps or seals. The Adena definitely used the site where the Serpent Mound sits for their own ceremonies. Whether or not they were the ones who built the mound is up for debate. Radiocarbon dating of some segments of the mound peg it back to 800 BC, a firm Adena date, while some other sections date to 1100 AD, a Fort Ancient culture date. This means it was probably modified over time or built over time. It could very well have been a collaborative effort over centuries by many peoples. Amazing proof of modifications to the Serpent Mound was discovered by Jared Burks of Ohio Valley Archaeology, who used his famous magnetometers to detect now-vanished curves of the Serpent Mound, which had been erased and smoothed over around 1000 AD by the Fort Ancient peoples. For a hunter-gatherer society to build this thing with only prehistoric tools is one thing, and for another culture from hundreds of years after to modify it, again with prehistoric tools, and still keep to its precise astronomical alignments is a whole nother thing. This place was important. And all we can really say with certainty is that the Serpent Mound was a massive earthen calendar, and that it was used and maintained by multiple civilizations over thousands of years, and altered whenever it was seen fit to do so, or when societal or cultural need arose. It is a baffling and gigantic monument to a thriving and mysterious peoples who are entirely unknown to us. The civilization now walking atop their graves and living off the land that they tamed.
So now we're at, I don't even know how to pronounce it, SEIP earthworks. So SEIP earthworks. This is one of the, I believe it's one of the earlier mounds to be excavated and to be identified as what they now call the Hopewell culture. That is, of course, not what these people called themselves. Hopewell was the name of the farmer who owned the land that the mounds sat on. This one's a big boy.
SEIP earthworks. When I got home, I learned it's pronounced SEIP. During its heyday of 100 BC to 500 AD, was one of the most important cultural centers of the North American continent. Barely anything of it remains today, save for a reconstruction of its largest mound, but it once was comprised of 2 miles of earthen walls surrounding 120 acres of land in the shape of 2 massive circles, which were connected to a 27-acre square, all of which were aligned to astrological phenomena. We see here the central mound, which is a partial reconstruction, and it is one of the largest burial mounds of the Hopewell culture at 240 feet long, 160 feet wide, and 30 feet high. It was a massive grave which contained over 100 burials of people of importance. Underneath the mound are the remains of 2 large buildings which were connected by a smaller structure, all of which were intentionally burned down and intentionally buried. Found here are some amazing artworks, such as the famous clay seep head, as well as many copper artifacts and surviving fragments of Hopewell clothing and cloth. And the site represents a common theme in Hopewell earthworks, namely plazas made up of interconnected circles and squares containing mounds and other smaller earthworks, and all of them constructed to specific units of measurement and astrological alignment. They represent a common engineering method, belief system, and intentional planning that shaped the lands of what we now call the Midwest. And just think of it. Think of all these amazing structures that once covered every inch of an area we now know to be home to some of the most ignorant and inbred people in all of the world. Ohio, a state whose most abundantly built structures are ice cream stands, cholesterol-laden burger joints, and craft breweries. In a state that is swelling with people who have only one goal on their minds: to isolate in their gated communities, to sit behind their fences and their homes, which burst at the seams with needless consumer goods, to ingest enough carbohydrates and sugars so as to win the title of most obese people in the world, and to finally finish their meaningless specks of lives and one final glory in the form of a mall shooting and AK-47 wielding suicide by cop, or in a Fox News-induced haze and momentary lapse of reason by driving their Pontiac Vibe through a crowd of left-leaning protesters, and then rotting away in the jail cell for 50 years on after that, their night of greatest glory. What a land these Hopewell prepared and shaped for us, the colonizing settlers who came here with no idea what to do with their earthworks and plowed them all down to make room for vape shops.
Will we ever know the reason for mounds?
It's 9 a.m. I'm really tired and hungover because I went and saw a punk show last night. At a laundromat. And then I slept in my car behind the venue. And I got up at 9 a.m. and drove out to Alligator Mound. And it's kind of depressing because it's just in the middle of a subdivision. I'm watching all the dads shuffle off to work, the kids shuffle off to school, and the moms are starting the daily dose of Xanax and White Zin all around this, the only other effigy mound in Ohio. So obviously a very important ceremonial place that we have called Alligator Mound, even though it's not an alligator.
Okay, so the kids are off to soccer practice, and we can look at the Alligator Mound now. It's barely perceptible. It's pretty much worn away since this area is just a park for playing in, and it's been tread down to nothingness, but you can kind of see the legs and tail there. The legs do point to some solstices or something, but I don't think it's nearly as exquisitely aligned to a solar phenomenon as the Serpent Mound is. And I couldn't find much info on this site beyond what is said on the plaque. It says it was built by the Fort Ancient culture, people who came after the Hopewell, but that doesn't sound right to me because the Fort Ancient folks weren't really mound builders, but you can't really blame the archaeologists if they got it wrong, because their funding gets cut year after year after year, because our tax dollars have to go to more important stuff like guns, boats with guns, and cars with guns, and ships with guns and jeeps with guns and so on. Like way more important stuff than mounds.
Tucked behind the Southgate Shopping Center, we are standing in the center of the great circle of the Newark Earthworks. This is a absolutely gigantic site and is blowing my mind, quite frankly. The Newark Earthworks is a series of earthworks covering about 4 square miles that is geometrically almost perfect in its design and very astrologically significant. Probably was an observatory. It's lined up with all sorts of stellar objects and lunar rises and sunrises. And it's just, it's the size of an arena. It's crazy. You can't really see it, but I'll get some photos later for perspective. But we're in the middle of a giant circle, an earthen wall making a circle, the interior of which has a giant ditch that was filled with water. That must have made this look amazing. And then behind me is the Eagle Mound, which was a longhouse that was then burned and buried. Now this is a hunter-gatherer society from almost 2,000 years ago. These are people that supposedly were too busy hunting and gathering to, build homes or start civilizations, and they made this gigantic structure that is absolutely blowing my mind.
Here it is, the Great Circle, part of the Newark Earthworks, and all I can think of when I look at this thing is pageantry and performance. I mean, just imagine all the trees out of this. Imagine just this big cleared area, this giant wall around it, and just the reflection of water of that moat that runs on the inside. And I mean, I'm no archaeologist and I don't know nothing about this place, but when I look at it, I just think, well, okay, it's an arena. It's an area for performance, right? I mean, obviously this is a gathering space. When you look at the layout of the larger area, you see causeways. It looks like even areas where booths at a fair could go or something like that. If Gwar existed during these times, this is exactly where Gwar would be performing. It would be an amazing concert. There would be soda pop, fake blood, chains, and music, and thousands of people, and it would be just amazing. I mean, obviously, this has to be a performance area. It just can't be anything else. But what do I know? I don't know anything.
But aside from speculation on usage, this is what we know. In terms of area, Newark is one of the largest earthworks in the world. Not much remains, but what does is still gigantic. It was built by the Hopewell, a mound building culture that flourished throughout the Midwestern and Eastern North American segment from about 300 BC to 500 AD. Artifacts excavated here and carbon dating of organic materials pulled from fire pits here show us that it was used regularly from about 300 BC to 100 AD. 3 sections survive, and they are denoted as the Great Circle Earthworks, the Octagon Earthworks, and the Right Earthworks. Look at their shapes. What the hell is this shit? What the hell was it used for? And remember, this stuff was built by hunter-gatherers, people who were nomadic, not sedentary like you or I. Just like you and I don't live in sports arenas or shopping malls, well, I can't say that with certainty about all of you, but regardless of our large population of gluttonous consumerist Morlocks, one usually doesn't live in our ceremonial centers. And so it was that the Hopewell didn't live at the Newark Earthworks. It was a place that was visited periodically throughout the year for who knows what. Conferences, ceremonies, concerts, anyone's guess is as good as anyone else's. There are burials present, which mean the area served funerary purpose, and there are remains of a burned-down longhouse, which is evidence of ceremonial purpose. Burning down ceremonial centers, or even homes, is a tradition we see in the Ohio area and in many later cultures associated with the Hopewell. People would use a home or a settlement for a few generations, then burn down the structures, bury the dead in the ashes, build mounds over the graves, and leave, never to return. Also, the whole layout and plan of the Newark Earthworks is specifically aligned to lunar rises and sets.
This is evidence of complex knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. To be able to plan out these earthworks so specifically is evidence of these people's great intelligence and unified society. A society that hadn't really developed agriculture, that didn't have the wheel or written language, a society that was fairly nomadic, felt it extremely important to spend a lot of human time and energy using prehistoric tools and no machines and no pack animals to make this space in this spot into precise astronomical alignments. Although we will never understand the purpose and use of this place, what it can tell us is that our perceptions of what is intelligence, of what an advanced society is cripplingly incorrect. If you want to know how an American views an indigenous person, just go to a store selling crystals. When you say Native American, the average white person thinks loincloth, dream catchers, and teepees. And oh gosh, they're so spiritual. I have a friend who's 1/4 Native American and they run an intensive sonic healing yurt in Ohio. You must simply try the anal sun saturation ceremony. That is not the Native American. These peoples were a highly intelligent and cultured society who thought it worth the time and effort to make this place for us, for the world to use. I cannot recommend visiting this sacred space enough. It crackles with energy and life and history, and it serves as a massive testament to the people who lived here and as a massive reminder to what shitheads us modern Americans are.
I'm traveling throughout rural and suburban Ohio, and wherever I'm going, I'm confronted with intense and almost confrontational statements of nationalistic pride, of anti-immigration sentiment, or of dire and foreboding warning that if I don't change my ways and follow the Christian God, it's all going to hell fast. And I find it incredibly baffling that these statements are even tempered slightly, that they aren't getting even a grain of perspective from these ancient peoples whose remnants are literally within a stone's throw. No matter where you go, you can see you bear witness to a civilization that was here before ours, who are the true natives, and they were also here before we thought up the concept of the Christian God. And I wonder to myself, what do they think when they see these giant earthworks? And the answer is they think, oh, it'd be a perfect place for a golf course, because right behind me is the other half of the Newark earthworks, the observatory mound, a octagonal system of earthworks that were precisely aligned to lunar rises and settings that I can't get into because it's a private golf club. Well, I drove an hour and 10 minutes to arrive here, the Hopewell Mound group. This was a massive site surrounded by 6-foot-high earthen walls. It contained many ceremonial centers, burial mounds, and earthworks in the shapes of octagons, squares, and circles, which means it was connected to the Newark earthworks and means it was some kind of observatory or ceremonial center. They found great works of art here, a hand and an effigy of a man made out of mica. And it was just an amazing, spectacular sight, just humongous. It stretched as far as the eye can see, but as you can see now, there's absolutely nothing, because when American settlers came in and conquered the native peoples, farmers took over the land and bulldozed everything. So there's nothing left. But we got a plaque. Well, that's the end of my little piece about mounds. I hope you enjoyed it. I know there's no real academic information to be gleaned from the thing, but the one point I really did want to get across to you in this is that I'm 43, I'm single, and I have no children. So what that means is I have an endless amount of spare time just to be curious about the world around me, and nothing baffles me more than these ancient sites, these giant earthen structures that are here that we know nothing about, and we know nothing about the people who built them because we killed all their descendants off. And that colonial attitude that natives were just savages is just so blatantly false. When I just remember growing up being told that hunter-gatherer societies were just too busy hunting and gathering to create art or build infrastructure or build cities, and yet we have these massive earthen structures everywhere, all over this continent, that speak to the contrary. And they also speak to a civilization that was consciously evolved, that was spiritually evolved, and was obsessed, was compelled to do these things. And I'm barely compelled to get out of bed and wash my feet. And when I look around at the structures that we've built, all our buildings of steel and glass, it's just obvious that they won't even last 100 years after we're gone. And whenever whoever it is that comes and digs us up out of the ground and learns about us, all they'll see about us is that we were consumers. And that's it. That's all we worshipped, was goods, because our buildings aren't going to last, our houses aren't going to last. The only things that are going to last are the mounds we've built. Those mounds right there. It's a landfill. That's what I'm trying to say.